All right. Welcome back to Overengineered, the podcast where we ask the question, what's the absolute best way to do things we already have a perfectly acceptable solution for? Today, I am here with Nuno Maduro. Hey, Nuno, how you doing?
Dude, thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure, man.
Um, Usually I ask my guests to do a quick introduction. I'm tempted to do one for you, but I worry that I would leave some stuff out because you've just got so much going on. So you want to just say a quick hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Nuno Maduro. I am a Portuguese software engineer working at Laravel. I'm also the creator of Pest PHP, which is a testing framework for PHP. And I guess that's it.
I know that there's a lot more than that, but that'll do for now. We'll probably get into the other things. Today, the reason that I reached out to you was essentially I've been on this multi-year quest to figure out how to make browser testing not suck in PHP, and you came out on stage at Laracon and you basically showed this demo where it was like, oh, Nuno has just figured it out. And I just really want to dig into the nuts and bolts of how you did it. I'm curious to see what you found made it possible.
Mhm.
And it's just something that's been sort of a curiosity of mine for a number of years now. So I'm just kind of excited to hear the really gritty technical details if we can get into it. I'm sure there's a lot of
Yeah,
really
and
interesting stuff there.
Yeah, and honestly, like feels kind of good to have more than 30 minutes to be able to talk
Yeah.
a little bit about more the details, like why I've done it and what is the reasoning, what technology did I pick, how do I solve some problems? Because at Laracon US, I had to cut out so much stuff,
Yeah.
and for those who are listening, I was also one of the speakers at Laracon US, and I presented Pest 4, which comes with browser testing. And I had like a slot of 30 minutes, and obviously I had to demo as much as possible of what's coming for Pest v4 in terms of browser testing, but I had left so much off of it. And one of my big scaries was, are people really understanding the value of this? Because if you haven't used any browser testing in the past, you have no idea how much value we're seeing on stage right now.
Yeah.
So maybe I was thinking, like Chris, maybe we can start about talking a little bit about what was the existing state of browser testing in the PHP
Yeah.
world, and I will share my experience, and then maybe you can share yours too. So
Sure.
my experience was, I've started a couple projects where I needed browser testing, and I tried to use Laravel Dusk, and my experience with Laravel Dusk is it would kind of work well for the very first test or two, but once you scale your test suite to hundreds of tests, or potentially you start having some complex situations, it would always end up resulting on flaky tests, super slow test suites. We're talking about dozens of minutes. And this happened, like, I don't want to lie, but probably like in between 5 and 10 times already, where I had to literally ditch out Laravel Dusk.
Yeah.
And in the betweens of these years where I've tried Laravel Dusk, I have literally moved to other solutions. I remember the first one being Cypress. Have you used Cypress
Mhm.
already? You
I've
have?
used Cypress a little bit, and I know that uh, there's some tooling around Laravel and Cypress, but
Okay.
it's mostly I've played around with it just like, as a separate test suite, not using any of the Laravel niceties.
Right, exactly. So there is plus that Cypress is literally a JavaScript test suite,
Yeah.
so you cannot enjoy the goodies that Laravel gives you, but also it's JavaScript.
Yeah. I
So
think
from that
maybe
point, it is
Jeffrey Way
already
has built a little bit of something to help ease that pain, but it's just a JavaScript testing tool. Yeah.
right. And I used Cypress a little bit, but I was not happy because it's not PHP. It's just kind of a pain to write a test for this and kind of make it well integrated with Laravel. And early this year, actually, I started playing with Playwright.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy moly. Like, this is actually the very first time ever that I'm writing tests. It's not integrated with Laravel. It's not PHP, but they are fast.
Yeah.
and they are not flaky. It's the very first time I actually thought, okay, this they actually figured it out. On top of that, it came with a bunch of new features like natively parallel testing mode. There was a bunch of visual testing, recording. There was a bunch of new features that was like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. If we are going to ever have something in the PHP world, it needs to be on top of this because this actually works.
Yeah.
Was that your
Isn't it?
experience with you as well? Like over the years?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I think I've been really struck by, like, isn't it weird to be in 2025 and sort of think, oh, the open source solution from Microsoft is probably the good one. Like, I feel like they've become such good stewards of like open source tooling in the last decade, or
Oh
5 years
yeah.
or whatever.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's just such a strange shift. But yeah, when I started hearing about Playwright, I remember being like, oh, okay, we have to try another tool, right?
Hmm.
But I think I gave it a little bit more, or I was a little bit more willing to actually give it a shot because of that, because like Microsoft has been doing a really good job of producing good tooling for developers. Um, and yeah, I definitely found myself thinking like, do we just ditch Dusk and just rewrite everything as playwright tests? And for those things that are like a little bit annoying, okay, we just write if you need to authenticate, you just go ahead and walk through the login process for the test. Like just accept that some things are going to be clunkier, but at least we're using a tool that's, um, you know, that's solid and fast and doesn't seem to be so flaky. I felt the same way. Um, I think that Chrome driver has gotten a little bit better in the early days of using Dusk and Chrome. Um, I know in our code base, at least, we had a lot of custom scripts that would like essentially check a checkbox through JavaScript, because Chrome driver would like not consistently check the checkbox if you just asked it to, or there were a lot of workarounds that you had to do to make the tests actually work.
Hmm.
So I think that the like browser automation in general has gotten a lot better across all the platforms, whether it's Selenium or Cypress or Playwright. But Playwright certainly seems to be the most solid at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
One quick question, dude. This will be post processed, right? Because I'm not seeing
Yes.
my voice being recorded on the bottom. Is that
Yep.
normal?
Nope, you're fine. Yeah, I see it over
Okay, thank
here.
you.
It's all gonna be leveled and post processed, and you
Okay,
know.
cool.
And if not, we've got your YouTube videos, so we'll be fine.
That's right. That's right. Just on the
um,
topic of the Microsoft situation, I kind of feel like they have a bunch of good tooling now. Microsoft have
yeah,
just changed this mentality of actually shipping good software in being open about software too. I mean, TypeScript
yeah.
is probably the biggest example.
TypeScript, VS
Playwright
Code.
is, oh yeah, VS Code, of course, now being a default editor for many people. Um, and I'm honestly just happy that they actually also open source Playwright, because I do truly feel that it's so good. Like, and even on this quest of migrating Playwright to PHP, and I have to tell you about that because that's another story too.
Okay.
Um, and on this quest, I just noticed that they're actually super. They have Playwright for Go, for Python, for Rails, and
Mm,
also, like, dude, like 80% of the work I have done on this migration of Playwright to PHP was guessing the API, because the internals, I'm using literally the internals to write a PHP SDK for Playwright, and none of it
okay.
was documented. So I spent, like, dude, days and days together with actually some people. Puyapal is one of them. Do you know Puyapal?
Mm-mm.
You don't know? It's this buddy of mine who is working on with me on many projects like Pinkery and now Pest for too. And we had to literally decode Go in the way Go and Python are using Playwright to kind
Mm.
of have that same style on PHP. So we have to guess many things to be able to build this SDK. But on that topic, so the way it works, if you want to get into the details, is that Playwright has this. server mode. Let's call it that way.
Hmm.
In the server mode, here's to a specific protocol, and that's the protocol we
Hmm.
had to guess.
Yeah.
And the way we communicate from PHP is through WebSockets.
Yeah.
Okay, that's partly the reason why this is actually so fast and feels so native. It's because it's actually fast behind the scenes. We are literally
Yeah.
using interacting with a playwright server, just like JavaScript does, just like Python does, just like Ruby does, but we are doing it
Yeah.
in PHP, and we are communicating through WebSockets. Now, that WebSockets communication obeys to a specific protocol that was not documented. So we had to guess all the entire thing to be able to build an API on top of this. And yeah, it's so, once it was done, I was like, holy shit, like we cracked it, it's working. So
Yeah.
that was
That's pretty gnarly. I didn't realize that you had to write your own SDK. I assumed, because the way that these other tools work, or the other implementations that connect with PHP, they're essentially just like communicating with some intermediate process that then actually sends the commands, right? So in the
right.
case of Dusk, Dusk needs Chrome driver to be running, and then it's communicating with Chrome driver, which is then communicating with Chrome. I mean, I guess it's a little bit the same, but it sounds like you're kind of operating at a lower level than these
Exactly.
other tools. Yeah. That's
Exactly. I
awesome.
I think like the biggest difference, if you want to compare it a little bit with Dusk, is that with Dusk we had this thing in between, call it PHP WebDriver or whatever,
Yep.
which is effectively the SDK of the
Yep.
underlying tool being used by Dusk.
Yep.
While if I wanted to have Playwright, and for me that was a must, because I wanted to build on top of modern tooling, on top of things that I know that are actually working in 2025. I wanted Playwright, so I had to literally build everything from scratch. And that story actually began here on livestream. The some of the people here, which I call Nuno Nation, on my YouTube channel, they actually saw the very beginnings of this journey, and we literally started building this playwright integration. And at some point, Taylor saw a little bit of it. He was like, "I think you actually have something B here. Maybe you want to just stop talking about it and kind of making it a little bit more special to Laracon US." And he was
Yeah.
right. I think like my talk ended up being, successful in my eyes, because most of what people were seeing was new. You know what I mean? And that
Yeah.
kind of
I
made the
mean,
wow effect a little bit.
I want to give you a little more credit than that. I think that like the contents of your talk was very interesting, right? And I do think the splash was very exciting. But I also just want to say, I mean, I said this to you in Denver, and I'm going to say it again. Watching you present is really just a joy, and I think that um, I think that you could honestly be showing off anything, and it would be like really fun to watch, just because you
You too
clearly are
kind.
having fun up there, and you're very good at it. You're very good at keeping things accessible, going fast but not too fast. Uh, I mean, I felt like there were moments where you were like typing and zooming and swiping somehow at the same time. I don't even know how you were doing it.
Yeah, it's just
So
by the way, it's not natural talent like Caleb Porzio is, or Joe T. It's just literally muscle memory. So I just rehearse like 300 times off stage,
yeah.
and then it reaches a point where I can just do it without even thinking. It just comes
Yeah.
literally muscle memory. And you have been speaker as well in Laracon EU, so you know the nerves. You know
Yeah.
what is going to a Laracon stage is nerve wracking. It's honestly, I don't know why I do put myself on those situations, because I
Yeah.
feel I was dying, dude. Before Aaron Francis saying da 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 Nuno Maduro, I was literally dying inside. The
Yeah.
nerves was literally consuming my body so much, and you know exactly what this is. So
Yeah. I felt the same way. I mean, I said it to my wife when I got back from Denver, like, I don't know why, like why do we put ourselves through it? I mean, it is fun, but it's like I was glad to have, I mean, you had kind of the perfect spot, right? Cuz you're like the first of the day, at least you get it over with. I was the
Yeah.
first one after lunch, so I only had to wait half a day in like anxious terror, and then I was able to
Yeah.
like calm down and enjoy the rest of the event. But yeah, it
Yeah.
does. I don't think people necessarily understand exactly how much time and energy goes into the preparation. The number of times that you just are sitting in an empty room talking to an imaginary audience, like
Dude.
trying to deliver the talk, but also like keep mental note of the things that you want to change for next time.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
exhausting.
It
Yeah.
is. It is exhausting. Mentally wise, it's so draining. Like I know that every time so I only do rehearsals at the end of my day because I know that after that, the only thing I can do is gaming because I'm just
Yeah,
exhausted. You know
you're
what I
just
mean?
done. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, just getting back into a little bit of the topic of browser testing. So, I remember like when I finished this SDK with Playwright, um, one of the very first things I wanted to do is there is multiple things I wanted to do. One of them being, making debug more accessible. When we can get into that in a second, but also like I didn't like the API from Playwright um,
Okay.
because it was too verbose. It was kind of leads to flaky tests if you don't use it carefully. So I wanted to use it. I wanted to that API to be um, in the written in the way that anyone would not write flaky tests. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you an example. Like if you go, for example, to a form, if you click on log me in, for example, the first thing you see after that is a redirection happening, and then you see the form being displayed, potentially being displayed with milliseconds difference because JavaScript, and
Yep.
then you see the form being displayed. Now, if you're not careful, you click on login, and if you instruct Playwright to type on the input immediately, you would have a failure because Playwright will tell you, well, you want me to write on this given input, but I don't have the locator yet available. It's not on a page
Yep.
yet, you know.
Yep.
In your own eyes, you don't see this difference because it's too fast. But because
Yeah.
Playwright is also fast, you will actually see a blank page because of the redirection before the
Yeah.
input appear. And for me, this was like not unacceptable, but it just as a lot of our developers, you know that we have very little pain for tolerance.
Yeah.
So on this integration with Playwright, the first thing I did was okay. I need first of all a very good API to work with, and I think Dusk have an amazing API in terms of naming of methods. That's actually a very good API. So I loved it. So I just literally port the entire API to use Playwright behind the scenes. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
But then I've built an internal system of retries that basically prevent flakiness completely. Because
Mm.
if you attempt to locate, for example, a given input and it's not there yet, it will just retry. And it
Mm.
will ask Playwright, is already there? Playwright will tell you, well, not yet. I don't know what's happening, but it's not yet there. And it will basically keep retrying, meaning that once the redirection is over, once React boots, once it does its own ticks behind the scenes and the form actually gets displayed, Playwright will be there to catch the input and actually type the elements.
Hmm.
And I build this in the way that every single method you may be using, things like type, press, click, drag, all those things will be retried if Playwright cannot locate them.
Hmm.
And I think the value of this retriable system is actually very good. So I just literally added browser tests to Cloud, to Laravel Forge, to other projects of mine, and there is no flakiness at all. It just works.
That's
So that's
awesome.
one of the things. Yeah.
Is that something that if you want to, you can dig into and configure? Like if you're trying to sort of write a test for a situation where you want to account for where you don't want the test to be resilient because you're trying to test a scenario that you want to ensure isn't sort of flaky under the hood, is there a
Mhm.
way to sort of like opt into a more strict mode?
No, well, not at the moment, but I could potentially do it. Something you can do at the moment is configure the timeout, meaning that
Hmm.
in some of these actions, like typing on input, there is a timeout on this. So Playwright at some point will tell you, well, I've attempted to locate this input, but I was not able for the last 5 seconds, so I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
So that timeout is configurable. So we'll keep
Yep.
trying until the timeout expires.
Yeah.
But I don't think I have built a way of not retrying at all. And honestly, I think that people don't want that. People want to be able to
Yeah.
just work
It's
behind the scenes.
probably, yeah. Okay. I actually want to step back further for a second, because I think that one of the hardest parts of writing browser tests, or one of the most painful parts of writing Dust tests, um, for me, was not necessarily the test runner. It wasn't necessarily Chrome driver or Selenium or whatever it is. Um, it was the fact that you had to spin up a separate server, right?
Right.
And that was actually mostly the thing that I focused on when I was trying to solve this myself. Um, and I think that the fact that you have to run PHP Artisan Dusk instead of just running your tests regularly, the fact that Dusk under the hood has to copy in a special env file over and then
Yeah.
copy it back at the end, the fact that you can't use refresh database or do any of your normal test setup stuff, like those were such high pain points for me. And
Absolutely.
I feel like, you know, that solving that problem seems like the biggest breakthrough here. Um, so I don't know. I let me tell you a brief story of, of the ways that I tried to solve this that didn't work. Because probably maybe 2 years ago, I worked on a package that I called Dawn, where essentially I tried to spin up a bunch of like sub processes from the Dusk from inside of my test run, inside of the test runner, where it's essentially spawning Chrome driver in one process, spawning a special separate web server that we're going to intercept the tests in a separate process, spawning a third process to manage the Chrome driver, because the problem with that web driver implementation that you were talking about, that Dusk uses, is it's fully synchronous. So if you need to pause execution to let your test continue to run, you can't. Um, and I went down this crazy path of basically passing JSON over standard in and standard out to communicate with all these processes. And technically it worked, but it was actually slower than Dusk because of all the IO. And it just felt bad, you know? So after basically building a fully working asynchronous Dusk alternative, I just kind of walked away from it, because it's like, if this isn't faster than Dusk, what's the point, you know? Um, Probably, I don't know when, but many, many months later, I like was talking with someone about like, oh, here's this funny story of this thing that I did that didn't work out. And as I'm having the conversation with them, I had this like aha moment of, oh, well, if we just rewrote like some of the web drivers internals to make them work inside of something like an event loop, maybe there's a way to do it. And I realized, oh, this is like if you use something like React PHP and an event loop, um, this is totally possible. Um, and it's something that is technically possible to do with Dusk because of that. But the problem is you still have all the other problems that you mentioned, like all the flakiness and sort of like weirdness around Chrome driver
Mhm.
or Selenium implementations. Ultimately, I have a PR open right now against Dusk that's like, this is a way to do it. But the people who I've seen try to use it on like really big Dust tests, they just run into weird issues, and I'm like, I don't know how to solve that right now. I don't have the time. Like, it is what it is. Um, so I'm curious, like, what was your approach to addressing? And we may even need to talk a little bit more. I'm not sure if I'm describing the problem super well, because it's this weird technical limitation that's not exactly straightforward, but is what I think makes like PHP based browser testing so unpleasant to use.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know if you feel like I've described the problem well enough, or you want to take
Yeah.
a shot at it.
No, no, you described the problem well enough, and it's funny because your journey trying to solve, you know, the fact that it is two separate process is very similar to my journey. So I'm going to just
Yeah.
share a little bit about the story and how did I solve that problem. So once I was done with this SDK playwright, and I have built this whole Dusk API on top of it with this retriable system, we reached a point where we were kind of happy with the solution, but I was not truly happy because, just like you said, I wanted to enjoy a little bit of this goodiness that Laravel gives me. Things like notification fake, queue fake, or being able to assert that something was, someone was logged in at the end. And funny enough, just before that, the way I have built it before all this event looping story was actually also doing what you said. I was literally spawning a separate process for each one of the parallel modes, because I forgot to talk about this, but literally parallel mode is also something I wanted to unlock. So I was, spawning a separate HTTP process for each one of the parallel workers and setting the environment variables through the headers. So this is like all this
Hmm.
old magic situation behind the
Yeah.
scenes. So the environment variables would go through the headers of the request and then would be kind of unpacked by that separate process and being set up in system before handling the actual request. So
Yeah.
this was my original solution. Actually, I mean, this worked. I would say for a month like this, and it was working quite well. Meaning that parallel
Yeah.
testing was working, so unlocked the speed I wanted. It was fast already, but again, for two things, it was not good enough. The first one is that it wasn't it wasn't well integrated with Laravel, just like Laravel Dusk is not. So you couldn't use notification fake and all those goodies that Laravel gives you. But at the same time, debugging still felt like crap.
Yeah.
Especially when you move it to GitHub Actions, it would feel impossible to debug anything really, because the only thing you would have is a screenshot.
Yeah.
You have a screenshot in a timeout, and dude, it's just a
It's a
nightmare.
nightmare. Yeah.
And I was literally talking about this with we have the Slack channel at Laravel, which is the framework channel, and I was saying we have this very fun thing here, and it's fast, and however, kind of still feels like crap when I'm trying to debug and use Laravel. And that's why I sent you the pull request yesterday, because that pull request you are saying that you have made a POC of Dusk was shared to me by Tim McDonald. And he told me, dude, you might actually want to look into this idea of Chris Morel, because I think maybe he has something interesting on it. And I start looking, and I looked to the way you approached this, which was with with event looping.
Yep.
And the way you did it is actually super interesting. And it's kind of what I'm doing now using a different project, because you were using React PHP and I just switched to AM PHP. But the philosophy behind this is, okay, I'm going to assert if something happens. It actually matched very well with the retriable system I have, which is I'm going to
I can
assert if
imagine.
something, yeah, I'm going to assert if something happens. And if it didn't happen already, let me free the process so it goes to the HTTP server, which is now in the same as one as the test, and just check if there is any request to be processed. And if it is, just keep processing them. And once you are done, come back to the assertion. Is it already
Yep.
happy? Oh, not yet.
Yeah.
Go back to the HTTP process and just keep serving requests. And, this kind of solve the problem, like literally. So from that point, we literally allowed it to you to use things like qfake. There was a bunch of problems after this, by the way, like for example, I had to come up with this layer on top of every single request that flushes the state
Yep.
like Octane does.
Yep.
So I kind of inspire myself a lot on Octane to do that too. Flush the state between requests, but also like, oh, dude, there was this issue. Like, so basically, like if you are using Inertia and you have a real app, chances are that Inertia actually have hard coded URLs on the JavaScript. So
Okay.
which were targeting the server that build the assets.
Yeah.
But the server that you want to target is depends of the parallel worker serving the request. So I had to
Yeah.
hijack like the content being served to, if you find the URL, just replace with this one being used by the parallel worker. So yeah, that is like hacks like this all over the place. Either
Yeah.
that be the this small thing behind the scenes, or there's a bunch of shit like this basically. But that event loop story literally unlocked what I wanted for debug, but also for integrating well with Laravel, of being able to have the same process serving the test in the HTTP server. So if you were to fake things or mock even things, that same thing will
It just
be
works.
reused. It just
Yeah.
works. Yeah, exactly. um and it kind of worked for a bit until I actually moved this into real projects, because real projects you start seeing like all this weirdness, all of this
Yeah.
weirdness. It concerns the state, because if you, for example, if you go to Vapor today, which is a heavily JavaScript application that uses Vue.js and doesn't use inertia. So actually, every time you boot the page, it just spawns like 5 different requests to fetch information. So those 5 different requests would target the same server, and you cannot have state in between that is leaked or whatever. So, you know, there is a bunch of little things like this. But indeed, man, that event looping story that you initially described as a POC, it was a great idea that sparked kind of all this better debug story and better integration with Laravel. You had great ideas on there. I think like one of the things that I solved recently was not using React PHP, which I don't know if you noticed, but it just feels like not it just not have been up to date recently. And
Uh-huh.
you know what I mean? And there is a few libraries that are just not compatible anymore. So recently, like I just rewrote the entire thing on AIM PHP. Are you familiar with it?
I've heard of it. I feel like that's the first one that started to embrace fibers when they came out. So that was kind of
Yeah.
the thing that seemed interesting about it. But I remember when I first saw it, it was like, well, in a couple of years I'll take a look at it, because it felt very, very bare metal at the time. Has that ecosystem expanded a lot? I haven't looked at it since then.
Yeah. So it actually works. It really works good. Honestly, I feel it works even better than React PHP at this point, because
Okay.
it's based on fibers. It has little to no dependencies whatsoever. So that literally unlocked
Yeah,
me.
that's great.
Um, you know what I mean? Unlocked me allows me to install that on any Laravel application. But also like if the API, it's a little bit less complicated than React PHP, where if you
Okay.
want to do, because on my case, I wanted to combine an asynchronous API, which was the event server or the HTTP server, with a synchronous API, which is the assertions. So I had
Yep.
to literally jump in between serving requests and go back to this synchronous state. And with the AMP PHP, it just works almost natively. Where with React PHP, I would have to come up with all these weird functions like, just I cannot remember, but like just do that. If it's anything, stop there and then come back. It just it was
Yeah.
complicated. And AMP PHP felt a little bit more natural.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, looking at the docs right now, I see that they have a ton of packages that cover like WebSockets and Redis and HTTP servers and all the things that you would need for a project like this. So that's awesome.
Oh yeah, and they also like allow me to rebuild the old WebSocket story too, because the WebSockets back then when I was building this with React PHP, it was still blocking, meaning that
Mm,
I would make, for example, a request to Playwright, and I would have to literally wait for the response.
yeah.
And
But with this, you can use their WebSocket client.
Exactly. So the
That's
MPHP
cool.
gives me an event looping WebSocket, meaning that it will literally send a request, jump back to the event looping system, just to whatever is on event loop, and then get back to the WebSocket story.
Yeah.
So also unlocked that and just became much faster actually past PHP because of that.
That's awesome. I think, okay, before we go too much further, I think you and I get the sense that you and I have been deep in these weeds long enough that maybe we're glossing over some of the details. So I want to talk briefly about event loops and briefly about sort of the um, memory issue around the way Dusk operates. So let's start with that. If you're familiar with the way Dusk works, the reason that Dusk has all these limitations and the reason why Dusk does all the things that we talked about, copying env files and all of that, is essentially because of a single sort restriction, which is your test is synchronous, right? When you write a test, it starts at the top of the test and executes it synchronously to the end. But in the case of a browser test, there are lots of things that need to happen in between those, like between the assertions, or
Mm-hmm.
even between like the setup. So like when I request a page in a browser, that might spawn 6 other requests for assets
Mm-hmm.
or, JSON endpoints or anything else, right? And all of those things need to be handled before the next assertion runs. And so in Dusk, what that means is you need to spawn a separate browser so that a separate server, excuse me, so that that server can handle those all the requests that need to be handled before the next assertion runs. Um, what that what that means though is all of the things that we're used to running our Laravel tests, where we can sort of set up the world ahead of time and then run our assertions, are no longer possible because when you set up the world, say you do queue fake or notification fake or whatever it is, all that's doing in Laravel is it's swapping out the notification driver with a fake driver in memory in your test.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't have any impact on the separate web server that Dusk spins up. And that's also why you can't use the refresh database trait, because
Yep.
uh, in a regular test, the way refresh database works is it migrates the database once at the beginning, and then it runs your tests inside of a transaction and rolls the transaction back between each test. So all of the data that's visible in memory in your test is inside of a transaction that's not available to an outside process, which is why
Yep.
there's all these weird endpoints in Dusk to like force a user to be signed in or like do
Yeah.
sort of jump past things. Those exist basically to work around the fact that these two things are two totally separate memory footprints that can't talk to each other.
Yep.
Um, and
And
so,
maybe we can
yeah, go ahead.
you can expand a little bit on the why database transactions is a problem, because at scale that would be a problem for me too. With something like Laravel Cloud with hundreds of migrations, using database transactions was just impossible at scale with many browser tests. Being able to use refresh database, it just again unlocks being able to use browser testing at scale.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and so the solution that we've kind of both come uh, to answer this problem is to use an event loop. Um, anyone who's familiar with JavaScript has probably interacted with an event loop. They're less common in PHP, although I feel like we're starting to see them, crop up more in like modern PHP. If you've used Laravel prompts, it's not using React or AMP, but it's essentially just a big while loop that does a bunch of stuff inside of the loop, and is constantly rerunning to compute the current state of the terminal UI. Right, that's like a simple. I say simple. Trust me, prompts is not simple, but um, it's simple in that it's not using a package to do it. Um, but things like React PHP and AMP PHP are essentially very sophisticated event loops for PHP. And what an event loop is essentially just a big while statement. Um, and you essentially attach different things to happen inside that loop, right? So if you're implementing something like a timer, you're essentially saying, make sure that at least every 5 seconds this thing happens. And each time the loop uh, processes, that's called a tick. And like a timer is essentially just going to say, all right, on each tick, like, has enough time passed? If not, just keep on going. If so, then execute the callback that I was given. Right? That's a timer. But the thing that event loops really unlock in PHP is much of our code is just waiting on things. It's waiting on
Oh yeah.
IO. It's waiting on something where, with this WebSocket or HTTP server stuff, it's like data is just coming across this like socket, and we just have to wait for all of it to come through.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about synchronous code, your code is just sitting and waiting and hoping that like the request is going to finally come through so it can operate on it. What these like more sophisticated event loop packages provide is tooling around, okay, here's an implementation of an HTTP server that um, offloads the IO so that when we're waiting, the event loop can keep on running, and it's just going to check in and like sort of when all the data has come through, then it'll continue processing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and that's really the thing that unlocks a lot of this capability, because you can essentially fake parallel processing by letting 2 or 10 or 100 separate like IO bound things run in the background and just check in on them inside of all these ticks until one of them comes back, and then you process it and then another one comes back. Um, and that is, I think that's like the thing that makes uh, the sort of faux parallel operation. And it's not even faux anymore with fibers. Like fibers actually lets you um, do some multi-threaded operations in PHP. But as developers, we don't have to think about it. You can just pass it a callback and say, hey, when you're ready, call this, or you can build up a server and say, hey, when you have a full request, give it to me, and the loop can just keep on running with a bunch of these listeners on it. Does that feel like it gets us
Yeah,
caught
it
up?
was a great explanation about what is event looping, and it's kind of crazy if you think a little bit. Like every time we are on PHP and we do a SQL query, for example, that takes let's say a second, you have literally 300 megabytes allocated to this process waiting for the query.
Yep.
And we never think about that, but if you think a little bit about this, it's actually like holy moly, like we have all this compute power, and it's most of its time, if not 99% of this time, because of the way PHP is built, is just waiting. It's
It's just
doing a query
waiting.
to it's just waiting, like doing a query to MySQL, and it's waiting. Then it's doing a query to the plain engine compiler or whatever, then it's waiting. Then it's fetching a file from the system, then it's waiting. And again, just like you described, what these tools do is that they give you underlying functions that instead of making a SQL query and just staying there waiting, just use this one, and this one will just come back to you when it's ready. And I think I have seen on the internet a little bit these illustrations about the restaurant menu thing, where instead of having wait for each person cooking its meal, you have this single manager, which is the event loop, and kind of checks on them every single time on the tick. But
Yeah, that's a good
but
one.
yeah, man. Yeah, man. Using event looping was kind of one of the big unlockers for this debug and integration story, but at the same time unlocked many other things like not using database transactions, which again at scale it's just not feasible. Um, what else? Yeah, that was it for debugging integration. Kind of made the whole story there. That was a good one.
So the thing that I'm curious about, I've never looked into Playwright's parallel testing. How
Mhm.
does that work? How
Great
does that work
question.
under the hood, and how's it play into the implementation in Pest?
Yeah, great question. So the way it works is so again, Playwright is running on this worker mode, and that worker mode is the same worker mode for each one of the parallel processes. So it's just one worker mode, basically serving all the workers that we have on Pest PHP. And the
Okay.
way it works is that you work with identifiers, basically. So you say, I want to spin a new Chrome browser, and Playwright will tell you, oh, okay, let me spin that Chrome browser for you. This is the ID. So no matter what you do inside of that single Chrome browser, this is the ID that you need to use. And I will store that ID on that parallel process. And then I have another parallel process from Pest doing another test, which potentially might be on Firefox or WebKit. And it tells Playwright, oh, I need another browser. And Playwright will tell you, here we go. I have now a Firefox ready for you. This is the ID. So it's a single worker in Playwright serving all these parallel modes of Pest, and the way they communicate is over a given unique ID.
Hmm.
So it's just native parallel mode behind the scenes, and of course, Playwright, behind the scenes itself has its own way of being performant with all these browsers. So you can spin like hundreds of browsers if you want to.
Hmm.
Um, and you have to deal with a bunch of things here. Like you need to clean up resources. So if you open a session, you need to close the session. If you open a browser, you need to close the browser. And if I'm not careful, it will end up all these browsers being hanging in the background, even if I finish a test suite, because it's literally a
Hmm.
separate Playwright worker around this. So there is all that deal to handle, but it really that's the way Playwright works in parallel mode. Works with IDs, and it's just native. It's parallel mode by default, basically.
Okay. And then I'm actually not sure. Is Pest's parallel mode using Paratest under the hood, or is it your own implementation?
Correct. Past parallel mode uses Paratest behind the scenes, and the way
Okay.
Paratest works is that it's kind of simple. So past. So the way it works from the beginning is Past boots, let's say the process of Pest, let's call it this way, or boots PHP unit, and it reaches a point where, okay, do we have a dash dash parallel flag? And the terminal will tell me, yes, you do. And I'm going to say, wait a second, instead of running PHP unit, I'm going to run Paratest instead. And what Paratest does is spawning various processes depending of the number of CPUs that you have. So if you have 14 CPUs, it will spawn 14 parallel processes. And then you will communicate in a very performant way between the main process, or the parent process, let's call it this way, and the child processes, and deliver one task one by one to these various workers. And those various workers will communicate with the single Playwright worker mode, which is already spawned in advance
Yeah.
by the browser testing plugin.
So are you able to use the Paratest process token as the ID for Playwright, or do you have to do something to sort of keep those in sync, like keep those in sync?
Yeah, so great question. So basically, the way that once we are on the parallel mode already. So imagine that we have 14 processes. Let's talk about
Yeah.
a single one of those 14. Every single one of them will spawn its own HTTP server to serve Laravel requests. So if a
Yeah. Yep.
task needs an HTTP server to serve requests, it will have one. And if you type visit, which is the function I am giving you to allow you to interact with the browser, that will spawn a process, and that will spawn a browser, and that browser will target that same HTTP server that works only for this parallel worker.
Yeah.
So it kind of uses the full power that we have, because right now we have very expensive laptops, and I assume you have one too. And back in the days, with something like Laravel Dusk, you were using one CPU only, and you have
Right.
probably like 14. So this literally unlocks being able to use all the power that you have, and that's why on Laracon stage I went from 10 seconds to 2 seconds only.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's incredible.
yeah, but that honestly, that was not a good demo, because I could have made it a little bit more spicy if I wanted to. Because if I keep adding more tests, like if I had like 100 tests, for example, there you will really see the difference, because we would wait minutes for Dusk, And because we have 14 parallel workers, plus being on top of Playwright, which is by default is already twice faster, you would see it like the
Yeah, it
thing
all
being over in,
compounds.
yeah, all compounds exactly. It would be this thing being over in 4 seconds or 5 seconds, and you would have to
Right.
wait 3 minutes for Dusk.
That's
Um,
wild. Yeah.
exactly, and that's why I think like this parallel mode story really unlocks being able to use browser testing at scale, which is exactly what
Yeah.
I wanted. Is when the things would fall apart is when I had more than 10 tests. So I wanted to be able to come up to Laravel Forge, being able to write 100 tests and not having to wait 30 minutes for the CI. And the
Yeah.
parallel mode plus Playwright, because Playwright it's literally twice faster by default already.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do behind the scenes, but it is. If I run past right now without being in parallel, will already be twice faster.
Yeah.
Um, so all this compounds, and again, I have like the browser. So the test suite that I have for this plugin is 400 tests, and
Okay.
if I remove all the sleeps I have here and there, it will run the entire thing 400 tests in like 6 seconds.
That's wild. I
Is
mean,
well, right? And I want to
anyone who
ask you,
has
yeah.
done anyone who has done any browser testing, any Dust test suite at any reasonable size, if you when you just did that just the first demo, right, where you swapped out this browse with visit,
Mhm.
um, just how fast you got the response back was
Yeah.
kind of mind blowing, right?
Yeah, feels like a
Uh,
feature test almost.
right, right. I mean, it does. It unlocks. You just don't have to be so stingy with like the browser testing situation anymore. You can just, if you want a browser test, you just write a browser test and it's fine. That's incredible.
Which leads me to a question to you. Like when you organize your test suite, I assume you have like potentially a bunch of unit tests, but you also have feature tests, right?
Yep.
So do you see yourself keep using feature tests from this point? Like, assuming that you are a Pest user.
I mean, I think that we do very few unit tests. We do almost all feature tests, and I would see us, uh, like I would see us continuing to think of almost feature tests as the um. What am I trying to say here? Uh, I think that we would end up leaning on browser tests in places that would replace feature tests, and our feature tests would be for areas that aren't really browser heavy. And it's a little bit different for us because our application is almost entirely um, just Laravel and Blade. We don't do a bunch of client heavy work,
Oh, you don't have
except
JavaScript?
for,
Okay. Hmm.
we have parts of the application that are full blown React apps, and we have some places where there's like pretty sophisticated Alpine interaction happening.
Right.
But for the most part, much of our app is still just full page reload and Blade templates. So I don't think I don't think I would switch to browser tests for a lot of those. But anywhere, I mean, more and more, we're finding ourselves writing pretty sophisticated Alpine components, and anywhere we were doing something like that, being able to do a browser test would be phenomenal. And I think we're probably going to be leaning more into inertia and React in the future. And so
Hmm.
like this makes that, I feel like, between the Pest 4 announcement and the Wayfinder announcement, I think that's those two things like push us that much further towards like, oh, we can lean more heavily into these like sophisticated browser interactions,
Hmm.
and still have like assurance that everything's not broken. you know
Right. Yeah. I feel you. Like if you are using Blade, probably um, there is very little room for actually having bugs on the UI. Um, but if you use JavaScript, like I'm using at the moment for many of the UIs I'm building, even Livewire, it's JavaScript at this point. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yeah, for sure.
I pretty much need, I need I need to browser testing to be functional.
Yeah,
And,
for sure.
maybe can lead us to the next topic if you want to move a little bit, which I presented as well at Laracon US, which is smoke testing and visual testing. So, I'm a big fan of something called smoke testing,
Yeah.
which is the part of the demo where I was demoing things like, these days people to do smoke testing, they kind of just don't do it at all, or just they use this thing called a search status 200, which, with Blade actually might work. You might be okay with it because you can actually assert C things using the native assert C from Laravel. But with Livewire, Alpine, Inertia with React and Vue, you kind of assert 200 doesn't mean anything. You can literally have a blank page.
Yep, for sure.
So that's why I also, for this past for playwright integration, I've built these various helpers which are combined into a single one called Insert No Smoke, and they literally tells you as well if you have JavaScript on errors on the pages, if you have console logs being split out, um, and many other ideas that people gave it to me over the next few weeks. But this is something else that I truly believe to be revolutionary in the sense that I can just go to Laravel Cloud right now. I'm going to just grab all of the routes, logged in as Nuno, and just basically just check all of them if I have any JavaScript error or if any of the pages is being blank at the moment. Such an
Yeah.
easy test to write, and I think like it's also big value.
Yeah. I mean, I think that even for a more blade heavy website, doing full browser based smoke testing has a lot of value because, a good example is we might have like a Google Maps integration on the
Oh yeah.
page or, a little bit of inline JavaScript here or there. Or like the thing that we're dealing with right now is, our code base is very large. Um,
Hmm.
it's hard for us to adopt. uh, we I think as a team we're very good at keeping the code base modern, but some things are hard to adopt. And one
Hmm.
good example of that is the switch to Vite. Um, we have so much custom tooling around like the JavaScript build, essentially to implement a bunch of things that now you just get for free with Vite. Um,
Right.
and unwrapping all of that is very hard. And there's a lot of just little inline JavaScript snippets around the code base. A great example is there's a lot of code that just assumes that functions declared in the global scope are available in the global scope, but
Oh no.
when when you switch to Vite, everything is loaded as a module, which means
Oh
that these
yeah.
functions are no longer global. Um, and so, essentially, over the last couple weeks, Bogdan has been just looking at every inline script tag and, adding window dot everywhere that needs to have it, or like, and, a lot of these things, those little inline script tags are not super important. It's a little tiny page that barely anyone ever hits. Um, they're not under test. Testing that like inline JavaScript was a pain before, and so we just didn't do it. And so something like this, to be able to just say, okay, like now we can just run everything before the switch to Vite and identify there may be script tags that are broken right now that we would have to fix. We fix
Yeah.
those, and then when we switch to Vite, we can just run those tests again and know that that Google Maps integration that is defining a global init map method that you pass into the as a query parameter to the Google Maps thing, like all these weird scenarios that you have to deal with. We would see that error right away. It would be incredible. So I
Yeah.
think it's a no-brainer, or it should be a no-brainer for anyone. Um, I think it gets a little bit difficult um, that with a big app that has lots of routes that are bound to resources. You have to do a certain amount of setup to make them even visitable
Yeah.
in the first place.
I
Uh,
think honestly, that what you just said will be probably one of the most will be the complaints on the very first days of Past 4, because people think
mhm.
like I can just add browser testing, it will just work. It will not just work, because you will
Right.
put that on GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions doesn't have your Echo credentials or whatever. Bam, it will blow up. GitHub Actions doesn't have, some of the things you potentially do locally, but you don't do it on GitHub Actions because you never need to, and it
Yeah.
will just won't work. And even things like credentials to see Google Maps is one example.
Yeah,
Because you
for
probably
sure.
don't. That's So you have all this setup. Like even now was like today I worked on actually heading browser tests to Laravel Forge, and Laravel Forge, the test suite runs on GitHub Actions with inertia. And actually, if the very first test I wrote, browser test, it just failed immediately because it was missing all the reverb keys, for example. And I
Right.
said, "Oh, okay, I need to have the reverb keys." And I had the reverb keys, and was another key missing. And I think this will be the biggest complaint. However, for fresh new apps, it will just work immediately, no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
But that will be one of the very first pain points for sure.
I do wonder if we'll see a shift, because I think that right now my impression is, I could be wrong, but my
Hmm.
impression is that most test suites lean very heavily on factories, and most Laravel suites don't just seed a database up front and then run all their tests on the seeded data, right? Uh,
Hmm.
I could be wrong, but that's my impression. And I wonder if we're going to see a shift away from like sort of this just in time factoried data to uh, investing more time in like having sort of a main seeder that seeds all the test data that your application is going to need, because um, that will make it easier to do things like smoke testing, where you will need a ton of different models to exist in um,
Mm,
different
yeah.
contexts. You
Right.
know, like right now, it's not a problem to do that test by test, because I'm just like, okay, I need a user. I'm going to say user factory, and I need
Yeah.
a team or whatever. I do team factory. But if I just want to say go through the entire app and test everything,
It's
now I
not
have
easy, no.
to like go through and factory up a
Yeah.
million different resources before I run the code.
Yeah.
Whereas if
On
I just
cloud,
had a great seeder, it would
yeah.
just
On
work, right?
I feel you. On cloud, I had to use like 30 factories, I think. Literally one by one. User
Yeah,
factory, organization factory, application factory, environment factory, deployment factory. It was like one by one,
yeah,
like 30 lines of code to be able to actually do my first assertion. And you have not like a lot of people, like the most upvoted issue on Past at the moment is people asking me, "Hey Nuno, how can I use seeders on Pest?" Because actually, well. It's not that well documented, and I think even on Laravel, it's not documented at all.
okay,
So people also want. Some people actually want to see, just like you're saying, not even for smoke testing, but also for just for regular tests. They want to be able to
yeah,
reuse the same data all the time. I
yeah,
don't initially when I saw this, I didn't get it because like if you have you know 10 files of tests, if you potentially create a user on the very first one, that will impact the second test potentially as a side effect.
yeah,
So I never actually got it, and I feel like I need to actually use an approach like that on the real project to actually see how does it feel.
yeah.
And but I have for smoke testing, that's definitely a problem. That's one of the problems for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never I have my impression is it's more common in the Rails world to
Hmm.
sort of do a seeded use seeders rather than factories. I could be wrong there too, but I have a friend who's in the Rails world who has talked a lot about that. And one of the things that struck me about that approach, it's like it's a little bit of a trade-off, right? It's on one hand um you have to kind of think about all the seeded data across the entire application, what impact it might have, but it does also in some ways replicate a real application a little bit more. It's like our apps have to be able to handle records in the database that aren't related to the thing that you're doing.
Hmm.
And in some ways, having just like a big data set seeded first and running all your tests
Yeah.
in that means that you have to deal with like real world scenarios. Because I know that like I've certainly seen tests where you're doing like an assert count that like only one thing was created or nothing was created, and it turns out the only reason that that actually works is because your test is running in isolation. It's not actually that that there's actually a bug in your code, but
Hmm.
because you're like doing everything from scratch each time, you don't get to it.
You don't get to
So
it. Yeah.
it's an interesting approach. I don't know if it's going to be worth it because it does feel like there's a big trade off on the other end in terms of maintaining this one big suite of seeders. But
Hmm.
I wonder if the value prop has kind of changed a little bit now that browser based smoke testing is so much easier to do.
Hmm. I wanted to bring another topic, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, do you? So I never did it in the past. So maybe you have done it and you see the value on it. But now I'm actually considering for Laravel Cloud, for example. Do you see the value of browser testing post deployment? So, we have this test suite that literally runs browser tests on the CI. So, this is all we talked about until
Yep.
right now. But then I do the deployment and Laravel Cloud goes live. And now I want to run the test suite, maybe not the same one, because the same one would use factories and potentially fake things, but
Yeah.
maybe another one that is a little bit more light, that goes to
Yeah.
the actual Laravel Cloud website, logs in as a past user or whatever,
Yeah.
which already has maybe a setup in place. I don't know, and checks all these services and check all these pages, because I'm going to give you a real example of one outage that we just had on Laravel Cloud. No, people didn't saw it because it's like something really hidden, but actually the production logs were like down for one specific region. And this only happened in production because it targets a different service from staging and from dev. Um,
Mhm.
so on your test suite, you would never see it because we are faking everything, right? We are faking logs, so you would never see it. On dev and staging may actually be working because they are using little different services. But on
Yep.
production, we have this separate one, which um, was down, and we didn't saw it like literally as customer reported on support. So maybe like browser testing will also unlock a little bit of post production testing, actually, which is something I have never done it, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've used tools to do automated browser testing on like on a schedule to just kind of like confirm that in our case like that users can still register, right? Like I want to make sure that no matter what's broken, people at least can sign up for our service, right?
Uh-huh.
Or and also that the billing page works. Um And yeah, I'm trying to think. There was an uptime monitoring tool that actually had a really good suite, really good implementation of that felt like made it pretty easy to do. And
Hmm.
we ran those for a while, but the problem is they are hard to keep in sync with your application. So the
Mm.
idea of having a test suite, I would probably want to set it up so that you can run it both in CI and in production, right? So that that suite runs. If it fails in CI, it doesn't even make it through, but then it runs again, and in production, it hits the production endpoints. Um, but like, I mean, we do this as developers. I feel like this is a heuristic that I always have of like, if I find myself going and doing something after I make changes to a feature, it's like, oh, wait, I should go write a test because I'm manually testing it right now. And that's true of our production apps, right? Like you hit deploy, and especially if you're like deploying something that for various reasons, production may turn up a different errors than you had locally. you go and you log in and you go to that page and you make sure it's still working, right? So why not have automated tests for that? I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I feel like this it's something is a paradigm shift that people probably never thought about that, but I think now with Past 4 potentially that will unlock that given situation too. Same goes with screenshot testing, which is something I equally demo at Laracon
Mm-hmm.
US, which is something that have you used on Playwright that or not really?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I don't know if that was on Cypress. I don't think it was, but but again, like part of this smoke testing story, a little bit of seeing if things are working a little bit as expected at the first glance, comes a little bit this visual testing, which is something I don't know if it's official, but I call it that way. And what it does is basically takes a works with snapshot behind the scenes, so it takes a screenshot on the first run and then you will always be comparing that baseline with the
Yeah.
new test running. So if you see differences, I give that beautiful slider and um, which was on the demo. And I feel like even for production, something like this could be used
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
are
I mean,
always
that's
interacting with right. You are always interacting with the same user, which will create an app with always the same name. So basically, like, why not use screenshot testing for this too?
yeah.
That is something that I still need to work on, which is GitHub Actions tends to create different screenshots from the one I create locally with my MacBook.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and yeah, so Evan, you told me, so the creator of Vue, I actually got to hang out with them a bunch. That was super fun. That would make an entire podcast just about that because the guy is just so humble. It's just so humble. Have a million GitHub stars, man. If I had a million
Mm.
GitHub stars on GitHub, I wouldn't be that humble. It's crazy. So the guy came to me and said, "I don't think you will ever solve that problem because literally Chrome behaves differently in terms of rendering in your
Yeah.
MacBook than it behaves on Linux. So the
Yep.
only way you have to solve that problem is to make the screenshots on the CI, upload them as an artifact,
Yeah.
and then just hijack that to the actual code that way. But that feels clunky to me, feels weird. So I want to
Yeah.
find a way of just working. I don't know.
I mean, there's a world where you could use Docker um to render them the first time. Obviously that's no fun, but
Yeah, it just lost me there with the word Docker already.
that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. No, I mean, it is funny how these things that we take for granted, like font rendering, it's
Oh
like
yeah,
to make text show on the screen is actually such a complicated problem.
yeah,
And it's so deeply built into the operating system down to
yeah.
the like micro pixel anti-aliasing like implementation that it is funny. I mean, like if you look at the reason that so many people have used Puppeteer or one of those like Chromium based image capture utilities,
Hmm.
uh, I think in part is because it can just render text so well. Whereas if you try to do it in something like GD or even like a more sophisticated
Right.
PHP implementation, it's so hard. It's
Yeah,
wild.
but I actually, when I was first building this, I actually spent some time on it trying to understand, like, okay, why those operating systems are different. And, ChatGPT told me, oh, it's because of font issues. And I was like, okay, I'm going to use the same font. I don't care what the users have choose for this UI. If you are doing screenshot testing, I'm going to just reuse the same font which is
Oh,
universally
interesting.
supported. So I'm doing, like, before making the actual screenshot, I'm doing a bunch of stuff before to avoid flaky screenshots. So one of the things are universal fonts. I stop any kind of animation that you may have, I don't do it. So if you have, a perfect example for this is if you have something that fades in, fades out, that's like perfect for making flaky
Yeah,
tests.
absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, because if you don't go in the exactly same millisecond, the
Yeah.
fade in will be slightly different from the
Yep.
baseline. So I don't do animations at all. There is a bunch of CSS stuff that I disable before actually making the screenshot. You don't see a difference, honestly. If you make two screenshots with all this stuff and without this stuff, it will look the same. But for visual testing, they are different.
Hmm.
So I do a bunch of stuff. However, it did fail on GitHub Actions for some of my projects. So I need to come back to that topic, probably post release, because I'm out of energy for this project at the moment. I spent too much time on it. It was literally the last 3 months. And I honestly just thanks to Laravel, honestly, because if they wouldn't allow me to work on this stuff, it would just not work for me.
Yeah,
Because
that's incredible.
live streaming plus all my other open source projects, and plus my life, gym work and everything.
Yeah.
If Laravel wouldn't tell me, okay, well, just take this week off to work on Pest and just finish that, or if they wouldn't give me time to work on my talk, even I wouldn't not have time for this.
Yeah.
Browser testing is a serious thing, man. A lot of stuff into it.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, with the font stuff, even using the same font across the whole stack, I don't know that that's going to do it, because the same font is rendered different by different rendering engines,
That's
and
what
there's,
Evan you told me. Yep.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's maybe a world where you can get away with like, I accept a certain threshold of change,
The thing is that when you go down that path, you know what I mean? Like if you accept a certain level of changes, then you are not pixel perfect,
Yeah.
which is something that at Laravel, at least the designers here, they will kill you for it.
Right. That's fair.
Yeah,
That's
at
fair.
Laravel, like they go up to the pixel level. It needs to be like pixel perfect, exactly like it is on Figma. If it doesn't
Yeah.
match perfectly, it's not the same design.
Yeah.
So if we go down that path, that was my original thinking. But if we go down that path of, okay, let's accept some level of threshold. Okay, it might be differences, but the threshold might be like 1% or whatever. Then it's
Yeah.
not pixel perfect anymore, which
Yeah.
will work very well for CI and font issues. But then maybe there is actually something that is not pixel. It's not any more pixel perfect, and is
Right.
not captured by the visual testing.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting problem. You know what? I'm glad it's not my problem to solve.
Yeah, I mean, just a huge shout out to people who actually also helped me with this past 4 release. Puyapal is one of them, cracked a bunch of the playwright stuff behind the scenes. Adrian cracked a bunch of this visual testing capacities, because it's not something given by playwright. So we literally are using various things to make this visual diffing possible. So we preserve things as binary, and then we ask playwright to convert it to binary, and then we compare these two binaries using something from Cloudflare. So all this kind of feature was built by Adrian, and then I have kind of make it a little bit more Laravel-ish friendly. But Sonali also worked on Past 4. um, and my wife, for literally just being patient with me, because I work literally from my room. So I'm streaming from my room too, and just sometimes having to deal that I work until 3 a.m. every single morning, every single night is not easy.
Yeah.
Honestly, thank you for you too, because I mean that small POC that you have made for Dusk also kind of sparked a bunch of possibilities on this Past 4 project. And John Purvis for making the profanity checking on Past 4. So actually, I didn't demo the entire Past 4 release at Laracon US. So these multiple other things that we are going to ship with Past 4, including type checking, which is something that, so we had type checking before, type checking coverage, which allows you to see how many types you use in your code base. But now in Past 4 will be twice faster and instant on subsequent runs.
Hmm.
So we have that. We have profanity checking. So if you have any bad word in your application, we are going to detect them for you. And this was done by John Purvis. Thank God Pest is open source, honestly, because I wouldn't be able to build all of this myself.
Yeah.
Caleb takes an approach a little bit different from mine, I feel, because I'm super open about all this stuff, and he comes up with Livewire 4, also with a bunch of features, but feels a little bit more closed than me, at least. He kind of works on his own space, on his own thing, and by himself, I feel.
Yeah, I think that his approach to open source is a little bit it's just different. It's like he's giving the code out and he accepts contribution, but I think that it's like he's building it and if your contribution works for what he's doing, he'll accept it, but he's like uh he's like holding it a little bit tighter, which I think is just like a different approach. It probably just works better with the way he is, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, open source working on open source is so much fun. And I love that component of it. I mean, I think at InternetG we've benefited so much from just random folks bumping into issues that we haven't bumped into yet and fixing them in our packages. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
um, and that's basically how I've kind of thought about it. I think I'm probably a little bit more like Caleb in that I put a lot of stuff out there and I'm happy for contributions, but like it's mostly like I'm building the thing the way we need it. And if other people can benefit from that, I that makes me so happy. Um, but the number of times that someone has come back and said like, "Oh, here's like a fix for this little edge case," or here's a translation, you know, in another language," um, has been really really helpful. It's such a great part of the process, you know.
Yeah, that is goods and bads in open source. Like the good one is the one that you just mentioned. Obviously, having this project growing so much because of contributions, and I have, countless projects that have grown so much because of people, literally people that they are less, less social media than me, but they actually are big, big things on this open source project that I built. But also like, you know, I kind of have built a filter over time around this. But
Yeah,
so I talked about Taylor about this situation, but I remember like back in the days, 4 or 5 years ago, I would spend 5 months or whatever building something, just working my ass off to have something out, and that single comment would just destroy my entire week, literally just
yeah,
destroy me
yeah,
completely. And people sometimes have no idea how just being mean with others can just affect people. Not
yeah,
everyone is the same. And yeah, I remember like um, in what but I remember like what truly bugged me back then was not the comment itself, but the fact that I would be down at the table at night. My wife is next to me and I'm like sad. And that would just destroys me a little bit inside because I was like, why I'm sad about this random dude that I don't even know. And
yeah,
my wife is asked to deal with me being sad. That would just destroy me completely. Um, and Taylor kind of was sad. It just for him was a little bit the same back in the days with Laravel 2 and Laravel 3. And over time, at least I speak about myself. I have developed this filter that just literally nothing brings me down anymore.
yeah,
If I'm building something, I'll either that be an open source project or even a video. With videos, people can be really mean to you. They can
yeah,
they can tell you things about your face, they can tell you things about your voice, they can mock you, they will do all kinds of things. And thank God I have this filter now, because if I were starting to be a YouTuber 10 years ago, I would just already quit, because
yeah,
people on the internet can be really mean sometimes. And yeah, I mean, now it's a little bit better. Honestly, it's just good now. I don't I care much more about the people who are supporting me, and there is a lot of people supporting me, than the ones that don't even care, because most of those mean comments, they would not come from people that know me, they would not come from people that even belong to this community of Laravel
yeah,
community, PHP community. They
yeah,
would come from random people, and literally just they would just put that out there without even thinking.
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah,
they are not even being means. They don't just consider it a little bit. So this goes for all the people who are probably listening to us and are considering creating content that either be an article or a video or an open source project or giving a talk on stage. There is a lot more people that care about you than the ones that don't.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's an unfortunate part of human nature that we tend to fixate on the bad instead of the good, right? Like you said, you'll get 10 very positive reactions and one negative reaction, and it's the one negative reaction that people tend to fixate on. And I've certainly been there as well. Um, and I do think to some degree, it's like you have to be willing to put yourself out there long enough that you can like find a way to cope with it. For different people, it's different approaches. Um, but like it's something that you do have to deal with when you put yourself out publicly on the internet for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but that said, I mean, I think that I gave a talk at Laracon EU last year, and it was all about open source. And for me, the key takeaway of open source has really been the community that it's opened me up to, and it's 100% worth it. To put yourself out there,
Oh
because
yeah.
if you can get over the few negatives that exist out there. I mean, I don't think I would be having this conversation with you if it weren't for uh, you know, having contributed to Laravel 5 years ago, right? Like, not that there's a direct line between those two things, but that like
Yeah.
getting involved and contributing to Laravel in 2016 or whatever, uh, which I recognize is much longer than 5 years ago. Now that I think about it, is uh, you know, open me up to a bunch of other things that that just like opened up more and more doors, right? And I think it's been fantastic for me. I see it for you too. I see it for a lot of other folks in the community. Like, yeah, you put yourself out there, you try to engage with the world, and like you take, if you can take the good and leave the bad, it's great, you know?
Dude, that it's such a powerful message, the put yourself out there code, because you know sometimes when people think about creating something or just putting themselves out there, either that be a talk, a video, an article, they think, okay, I have created an article and 10 people saw it. That's not the outcome. That's not the outcome of that single action. The outcome will be one of those 10 people, they will remember you, and they will probably want to do something with you in the future, and you build something together and you think, well, we built that something together and only 100 people saw it. That's not the outcome again, because 10 out of those 100 people will be your lifetime supporters forever. And there is like dude, if I start thinking that is hundreds of examples of situations like this, and I just saw one today on Twitter, like Mary. I'm a big fan of Mary, one of the speakers at Laracon US, because I know how much she put work into things. She likes to be perfect on everything she does, and when I saw Mary on stage, I thought I know exactly how much she worked into deliver this talk, and the
Yeah,
fact that people are happy to are happy to see Mary on stage, and people were saying good things about the talk itself, I was just so happy, because I know this will just unlock. Mary will skyrocket from this place, because today, even today, like Jeffrey Way reached Mary. Would you
yeah,
mind being one of our instructors? And because of those, you would think, oh, I did a talk, and that's it. No, like you did a talk, a lot of people saw, and people noticed, and now you have Jeffrey Way coming to you, asking you to be one of the instructors, and maybe
that's so
like
funny. Go ahead. Yeah.
and then like maybe you will invite Mary again to be on this podcast, or it just unlocks everything. You will find better job positions, and if you can combine this with being nice, which is something I always try to tell people too. If you are nice, just by being nice itself, you are also locking doors, basically, because people want to be with you, they want to hang out with you, they want to know you more. It's insane, man. And honestly, every time I see a developer, there are developers way more talented than me. And every time I see them, but they are just always afraid of just doing stuff, it just breaks my heart a little bit. And hopefully, in the Laravel community, we are now talking about much more about this, about being open and being putting yourself out there. Hopefully, this message will reach enough people that a lot of people in the Laravel community will just do this naturally.
Yeah. I love that you brought Mary up. I was about to use the exact same example because I so happy to see that interaction. I I'm not on Twitter anymore, but someone mentioned it and I went over and I just like to see her go from just a couple years ago showing up at Laracon, not knowing anyone, just like kind of taking a risk to check this thing out, and just to see her, I don't know, connect with the Larabelle's community, and then you know, engage with her local meetups. She talked to PHP NYC, she talked to PHP Philly. Um, you know, I think that it's just a great example of how our community is really like rallying for people and trying to support each other. You know, like
Oh yeah.
I love, I don't know, I love that.
Dude, you can feel that. I was one of the speakers, and I felt that this is incredible because I literally felt when I was on stage that they wanted me to be happy on stage and to be successful
Yeah.
on stage. And
Yeah.
when I was outside, when I was, for example, watching Caleb's talk, people wanted Caleb to just enjoy himself on stage, like having fun, and just, they wanted Caleb to be successful with Livewire 4 too. And
Yeah.
you can see people clapping. They are, they are literally, a little about community have really something special. And sometimes it's difficult to describe a little bit, but it just comes out of small things like this. Either, you are on stage supporting people. I just love it. I just love it,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I just recently spoke with a friend of mine who runs a local uh, co-working location.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the things that really struck me is when I used to work there, it's not convenient for me to go there, so I don't get up there much anymore. But when I used to work there every day, he and the other community manager there would talk about community all the time. You know, I feel like every third word out of their mouth was community, and I remember kind of like uh, just feeling a little bit like, okay, like it's also just a place to work. Like it doesn't have to be so special. And then I went to other co-working places and I realized, oh no, like the thought and effort that they put into like fostering like a community of people in this space is actually special. And I just was like, you know, it's like when you're in the midst of it, sometimes it's hard to notice it, but then when you like leave, you can sort of see more clearly. I had that experience there, and I feel like the Laravel community is the same way. It's just like there's something special about it, and there's obviously a lot. I think that there's been a lot of intention. I think that, you know, obviously Taylor thought about this a lot. I think that Matt Stauffer is another example of someone who like put a lot of intention into the Laravel community for a long time, or still does. Lots of folks, yourself included, are like working to foster a really good space for everyone to be in. And when you go to when you go to Laracon, you know, it's just like so obvious that that's working. You know,
How was your Laracon, by the way? Like, did you have
it was
fun overall?
it was great. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I I I think it's funny because Laracon EU, for whatever reason, I think I didn't know a ton of people there. I guess I knew people. I don't know what the difference is, but I did not feel nervous going on stage at all. I felt fine. But Laracon US, like I was a nervous wreck
Yeah.
leading up to my talk. And like I was just like pacing the halls, just like I had this idea that I was trying to still nail down for like my just like concluding statement. Um, and it's funny, I like ran it through with Joe Tenenbaum the night before, and I was like, I can't get this one sentence right. And I
Yeah.
said to him, what I'm trying to say is essentially, and then I said it perfectly. And we both were like, oh my God, that was it. And I like got up to my laptop and tried to write it down. And I couldn't. I got it right just once and then I lost it forever. But yeah, I ultimately, you know, figured something else out. But I had a hard time being present for the first half of that first day. But then when I got my talk out of the way, I was able to like sigh and
Yeah.
be there for the event. I thought it was great. I mean, not I thought that every talk was phenomenal. I think that like um I've had other Laracons where it's like there are a couple that I'm just like not super interested in or I miss
Hmm.
because of some reason or another. But I thought that the talks, I mean, I do think that the caliber of the talks and like the expectations of the talks are so it's just like so high right now. I
Dude,
think that's part of
crazy.
why I was feeling
Yeah.
so nervous is just like I was joking with Joe, like Joe Dixon, when he flew that drone
Dude, insane.
on
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
stage, he kind of screwed us all over because
Yeah.
now you're like comparing yourself to, oh, well, am I going to be flying a drone on stage using
Dude,
reverb?
I remember like back in the days coming up with Sublime Text and doing some live code. That was it. That's like the
Yep.
bar. That's like the biggest, the biggest thing ever. Now it's just it's the minimal expected is that you bring something that feels live or feels a little bit, and Joe Dixon came with drone and that was
Yeah.
like holy I
Yep.
feel like it's kind of expected that people put the bar that way because all lot of cons have been with A players basically, and it's kind of good that new speakers are kind of respecting that a little bit and bringing their A game too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I feel like this year we have a great lineup, but also like all the lineup, lead um, was there for the expectations. All talks were great, and
Yep.
I really like this. I really like this Laracon. And to be truly transparent with you, I told this Taylor too. When I saw like Laracon US Newark in 5 years ago, I thought, okay, this is it. This is the peak of Laracon in Laravel. We are literally in Newark.
We're at the
You know,
PlayStation Theater in
a
Times
place
Square, man.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And
How
I
can it
thought,
get
okay,
better than this?
exactly. I thought that was it. Impossible. Like this is the peak of Laravel. Caleb just came with Livewire, and Taylor came with Vapor. That was like that's it. We cannot be
Yep.
more than this. And then last year we had this huge Laracon where a lot of people came with stuff. I came with Pest 3, Caleb with Livewire 3, Taylor with Cloud, and there was like stuff all over the place. That was already overwhelming for me. But this year we level up the things. Like we have a venue with 1,100 people, so the biggest Laracon ever. The venue was literally a concert theater, so
Yeah.
that felt huge. I don't know about you if you came for the rehearsal on the day before, but for me, when
Yep.
I came to the rehearsal and I looked this way, I was like, "Holy moly,
Yes.
this will feel so big to me tomorrow!"
Yeah.
Dude, I did the rehearsal 3 times.
Yeah.
I was so yeah, literally, I was so scared about my laptop don't have the proper resolution because of browser testing and shit like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did once, I did twice, and I did the third time at the end of the day because I really wanted to make sure everything was perfect. And it doesn't get easier for me. Like I have been in Laracons for a couple of years now, and every single time I'm just scared to death. Every
Yeah.
single time, so nervous, and I cannot even imagine. Like I have been speaker day two sometimes, and
Yeah.
just not speaking in day one is just horrible for me. It just kills me inside because I'm like on the venue. I have to see these great speakers, and I know, okay, if I'm not perform, I will be the only one not performing, and just feels so bad. And I'm just thinking about that. All I can picture is like people making fun of me and whatever. It's just crazy, man.
Yeah.
And I go to my hotel when that happens, and I just look at I just horrible.
Yeah. No, it's hard. It's a scary thing to do. It really is. I mean, it's a rewarding thing to do. And I think like I think for me, I'm in a place in my career where I'm not I'm not trying to build an audience or sell something.
Hmm.
Um so I get to basically think about this as this is really just a way to meet people and make friends. Which is it's an incredible opportunity to do that because, it gives everyone in that room an excuse to be able to talk to you. And I'm like uncomfortable. I'm introverted in those scenarios. I don't want to go up to someone and talk to them. Other people are feeling scared. We're all just like wanting to chat, but like not ready to do it. And when you give a talk, at least there's a reason for someone to come up and say something about your talk, you know? Um, and so, you know, it's incredibly rewarding in that way. And it's incredibly rewarding. I think it forces you to really master the thing that you're going
And
to
about to
present
do.
on,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, I got home from Denver. It's 2 hours earlier here. It's a 2 hour time difference. So, we put the kids to bed. It's 9:30 Eastern, so that's 7:30 Mountain Time. I went straight to bed. I slept from 9:30 to 9:30 that first day I got back. I was just so exhausted.
I know.
It is wild just
Dude, I
how
slept for
overwhelming it
16
is.
hours, I think, and I was still tired when I woke up. Like
Yeah.
I'm an extrovert. I'm lucky enough to be an extrovert a little bit, and I would come home. I slept for 16 hours, and I woke up, and I was like, I'm still exhausted. Like I feel exhausted, mentally drained from
Yeah.
the traveling, from everything, literally, from the shitty food
Yeah.
I'm having for the last 4 days, and and from speaking with everyone, so I just came home, slept for 16 hours straight, no stop.
Yeah.
It felt in and I didn't wake up in the middle. It was just 16 hours straight
It's
of sleep. And
awesome. It's
are you an
awesome.
extrovert or an introvert?
Um, I I think I span both. I think that when I get going, I think that I have a hard time like making that initial connection with people. Like I don't
Hmm.
I if I'm in a crowd, I tend to sort of like shy away um until I have like an opening or whatever, or someone like invites me in. But then I think that once I feel comfortable, I can be fairly extroverted. So I think I kind of play both sides to some degree.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely an extrovert, meaning that I my hands start sweating when I'm around people. I just get happy and I cannot stop. Just so
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm definitely an extrovert. So, but it still drains my energy. I don't know if that has a
Yeah.
name or whatever. But
Yeah.
at the end of those 3 days, I cannot see people anymore. I need to go home.
Yeah. It's
Um,
a lot. It's a lot. I mean, and like you said, it's 1,100 people. It's a lot of conversations, a lot of shouting over music or other people, a lot of just, late nights, and it's fun though.
yeah. Did you went to the technical party?
Yeah, yep, yeah, I went up to that. I was, still feeling kinda nervous about the talk. Joe and I each ran versions of our talk for each other before going up there, and then I told myself, "Okay, like, stay for a half hour or an hour or whatever, and then go down, get some good sleep." I ended up staying, until they kicked us out, actually, so I managed to enjoyed that. It was fun. An old friend of mine from Philly um, moved to Denver many years ago. I lost touch with him, um, and he walks up to me at the mostly technical party, and at first I'm looking at him like I know your face, but I don't even know where from because it's like I haven't seen this guy for probably a decade. It turns out he's not a Laravel guy. He's not going to Laracon. He lives in Denver. He saw Aaron Francis's like story about losing his job, and from that went back and listened to the entire back catalog of Mostly Technical,
Uh-huh.
and has become a Mostly Technical fan. So he just came to the party because it was Mostly Technical and he was in Denver. Um, it was the wildest, just like such an incredible chain of events. He was like, "Yeah, I knew that." Somehow he knows Matt Stauffer too, so it's like, "Yeah, I knew that Matt Stauffer might be there, and I thought maybe you'd be there, so I thought I'd just like come and see what happens because I'm like such a big fan of the podcast." Um, so I just ended up catching up with him for a lot of the night. Did you manage to go up, or were you
No,
feeling too
so
nervous?
yeah, so I had this golfing thing during the day
Yeah, yeah,
that ended up late, like 7:30, I think. And
Yeah.
I thought, okay, I'm speaking um, next day, first time, first dude going on stage. So I thought, okay, if I go to this party, I will have to scream because there's a lot of people. In order to speak, you'll have to scream. I
Yep.
will destroy my voice. And I said, okay, I'm not go. I won't go. And I went to the hotel with my wife, and we immediately fell asleep, which is something I was really happy.
That's
This is something
awesome.
else for
Yeah.
those who are not speakers have to think about, is that if you don't sleep, you will be no energized on the day after, and just, and for a lot of people, not being able to sleep just screws a little bit their head, like
Yeah.
because you want to fall asleep, but if you start thinking like, I cannot fall asleep, it's just horrible. So anyways, I fell asleep, wake up in the morning, went to the gym, had good food, and yeah, it was ready, everything just perfectly aligned. I was
That's
lucky.
awesome. Yeah. How was golfing for you? Have you ever been golfing before?
No, never golfed. So that
Yeah.
was my
Same
first
here.
time golfing, and it went way better than expected. Like literally,
Oh,
I
wow.
thought,
Okay.
yeah, I thought, okay, I will never being able to literally touch on the ball even. But I did some moves there, and I was
There you
not the only
go.
one. Like everyone sucked pretty much. Taylor,
So I
Adam,
certainly did.
yeah. So everyone sucked,
Mhm.
and there was like, if, like Eric Barnes, for example, he is like actually a legit player.
Yes.
So
I
he
heard
would
that he
actually
has
do.
like a watch that like tracks the distance and like he had all his gear with him and
Yeah, he had
oh,
like binoculars to kind of understand the degrees where he was and understand the wind and how that would affect the
oh my
trajectory of the ball
God.
and whatever. So that was him. But also, like, there was one dude called Adam Francis that actually he said, "Oh, I never played, and blah blah blah." But then he was actually
I
good
heard he
too.
killed it. Yeah.
Yes. So I
That's
think he
so
actually
funny.
got some training before going to this golfing thing. I'm pretty
You
sure
think?
he actually, yeah, 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 because he was like actually doing some good moves, and you can see no way you just learn how to golf today. Like you actually know some stuff about this. So he said, "Oh no, no, my first time." That's bullshit. He actually
Yeah.
got some training and some real one before going to this golfing situation.
That's so funny. Yeah, I was Dave Hicking was in Philly like a month or two ago. And we got together and just like on sort of a whim, we went to one of these like indoor golfing simulators where it's like, it's like a big screen and a little green and you can like hit golf balls into the screen. They have some sort of way of like projecting where the ball would have gone. And I went into it thinking, like, okay, I've been to a driving range once or twice in my life. I like, how hard could it be, right? Uh, we practiced hitting for maybe a half an hour and then played like a fake hole. And over the course of two holes, I think we were plus 15 over par each of us. I was like, oh no, this is not looking good. uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I did not have the Aaron Francis experience. I went out there and I was just like, oh my God, this is terrible. And I am terrible at it. I never need
Mm.
to golf ever again.
That was a fun one.
It was fun. I think I love the idea of a pre-Laracon event. I think next year it should be uh bowling or cornhole or I don't know, something a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, I think that was organized by Hank, and there was a lot of organization into it.
Oh, sure.
There was a lot of people golfing.
Yeah, it
There's
was a
there's
huge
a lot of
event.
huge event. A lot of people golfing. A lot of people that needed to be there to help us out.
Yeah.
We did basketball last year. That was fun.
Yeah.
Maybe next year will be soccer or something else. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
there
I
you
think
go.
it made the event a little bit more complete for sure. Made the event a little
Yeah.
bit more longer because instead of being 2 days, it will 3 days.
Yeah.
Um, and for those of us who are speakers, probably helped a little bit to crack some of the anxiety a little bit.
Yeah. It gave
Uh,
us something to do instead of just
just
sit in
look,
the hotel room
yeah,
and be nervous. Yeah.
and be nervous and thinking about all the possible things that may happen in my talk. Yeah, so that
Yeah.
helps. Yeah,
Yeah, I hope that the tradition continues, but each year maybe it's a different thing. It'd be
yeah,
fun.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh man. All right. We've been going for a while here. I don't know.
Yeah.
If there's anything else that you have on your mind, I'm happy to chat. But if this is a good place to stop, I'm also happy to call it here.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to stop. And for those who are listening from the beginning, yeah, Past 4 will come out on 21 August at
There
Laravel
you
Live
go.
Denmark. So Laravel Live Denmark, I will be speaking there, and I will try to tag Past 4 on stage.
That's awesome.
So, I'll be demoing many of the things that I didn't have the time to at Laracon US. So many features that we didn't saw yet. I'm going to demo the new stuff because in between Laracon US and today, I actually managed to do more stuff into browser testing that I didn't thought about back then, because until that point I was working for the demo. Now I'm working for something stable, which is which is not the
Two different
deal.
things.
Two different things exactly. I work very well with goals in mind. This is something that works very well for me. Even at Laravel, I like to, for example, if I'm building a huge feature which could take 4 months, it doesn't work for me. Like, I have to work on goals, and the goal is like having partially this feature implemented in production in 2 weeks or whatever, and then I start to trim it down into something that can be shippable. And with Passport, it's no actually different. So I worked for the demo until that day, so everything was like literally uh perfect made to actually fit very well a demo. And now my goal is actually working towards something very stable. Even though with browser testing, I feel like a lot of what will be released will be still experimental, because this is something new, a lot of new code. So will be a lot of things that I didn't account for. So once people start using Past 4 after the 21 August, they will see stuff for sure, and hopefully people will help me out with reporting issues, or even potentially fix those issues by themselves. But 21 August at Laravel Live Denmark, and that's the goal for now. And yeah, for those who listen to me, maybe you can check out my Twitter, Nuno Maduro. It's the username, and my website, nunomaduro.com. And that's it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're on Twitter and all of the socials, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
I cross post literally everywhere.
I
So
love it. Um, yeah, I usually ask, is there anything you want to plug? But I think we covered it.
yeah.
Um, this has been fun. It's been a real pleasure to catch up and get in the weeds a little bit here.
Yeah,
And
man, and potentially in the future we get to talk a little bit about various things like event sourcing. I would love to speak with you about that, about
yeah,
verbs a little bit
I'm
more.
game. Yeah, I
Verbs.
really, I really wanted. I actually, my original goal was to tag verbs 1.0, like just like during my talk, just before I start, just be like, okay, before I get started, I just want to do this and just hit that publish button. But we just have one little gnarly thing that I really want to get sorted before we tag 1.0, and I couldn't get to it before Laracon.
Right.
So I'm going to try to tag 1.0 pretty soon.
I can imagine
But yeah,
how painful it was to watch me using verbs for the first time. And I was
I don't
like,
know.
with a
No, I think you did
with
a good job. No, I mean,
okay.
I was glad to see that you were able to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like it's a bit of a paradigm shift. And you have to, it takes some time to start thinking
Well,
about
if
things in a different way, you know?
If you allow me to say, I think one of the biggest wins on verbs was it was not a paradigm shift. So it still felt actions to me,
Yep.
but it just came with a bunch of goodies on top of it, like that I just get them for free because I already build apps on top of actions, and verbs is literally actions
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. It's just
Um,
persistent actions, basically.
exactly, and he would just get all that history just for free, literally, and I could just all use then all the features that Event Sourcing gives me. And I think like
Yeah,
that's probably the biggest compelling reason to try verbs again next time, maybe on the real project instead of being something a little bit more simple for the live stream.
for sure. Yeah. Well, if you, if you're working on something and want to dig into it, let me know. I'm happy
Yeah,
to
let's
join
make it
you.
happen. Yeah, let's make it
Awesome.
happen.
All right. Well, this has been a blast. Until next time.